Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we have a case that a lot of you requested. It's from here in Argentina, and it's the case of the Pomar family. For almost a month, this was a mystery that sparked all kinds of theories and ended up becoming a national embarrassment. If you want to understand why, keep watching the video. My social media links are over here on the side, and let's get started with the case. This happened in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in 2009. This is the Pomar family, made up of Fernando Pomar, 40 years old, Gabriela Villagran, 37, and their two daughters, Candelaria and Pilar, who were 6 and 3 years old respectively. The whole family lived in Jose Marmol, Buenos Aires. What stands out about this family is that Fernando Pomar was known as a chemist, and at the time of the events, he was unemployed. Actually, this chemist profession was nothing more than a high school diploma indicating his technical training. He had specialized as a chemical technician, but this little detail led to a lot of speculation and theories about what had really happened. On November 16th, Fernando Pomar had a job interview in Pergamino. Here, you'll see the map so you can get a general idea of where it is. For this interview, he would travel on November 14th and would go along with his whole family. In this place, Pergamino, Gabriela's mother also lived, and he called her the day before to let her know they would stop by to visit. So she was expecting them. They would leave in their red Fiat Duna weekend on Saturday, November 14th, from the suburbs toward the edge of the province. Gabriela, for her part, had a son from another marriage who had to take an exam on the day of the interview, so he couldn't go with the family. With all this already planned, they set off for Pergamino on Saturday, November 14th, having informed Gabriela's mother by text message what time they would arrive. Unfortunately, somewhere between their home and Pergamino, the Pomar family disappears. So let's go over the events in chronological order. On November 14th, 2009, at 6:30, the Pomar family left their home in Jose Marmol in their Fiat Duna, together with their two daughters, heading to Pergamino, which, as I mentioned, is their hometown. The couple planned to return on the night of the 16th. Around 7 in the evening, they sent a message to a relative letting them know when they would arrive in Pergamino. This message said, "We're on our way," but as I already mentioned, they never arrived. Around 8 o'clock, Gabriela had a phone conversation with a lawyer friend of hers who was waiting for them for dinner in Pergamino. During the conversation, Gabriela told her that they were passing through Claypole. At the same time, Gabriela's father received a text message informing him that they would be in Pergamino around 10 o'clock. When they didn't arrive in Pergamino, the family who was there decided to file a report with the police. And from that point on, the search for them began, and the media found out about their disappearance. On November 19th, supposedly, according to the police, though the prosecutor denied this, Gabriela's cell phone was activated in Chivilcoy. And the next day, November 20th, an image appears that stays in the media for many days, becoming the subject of dramatic speculation. He's seen on a toll booth camera in Villa Spell on Route 7, Fernando Pomar, just him with his car. As you can see in the image, he looks agitated, according to some people, or angry, according to others, with his hand out the window and his mouth open, as if he's shouting or saying something. Some people said he was waving at someone, others said he was just talking to the toll booth attendant, but like I said before, it sparked a lot of speculation. On November 23rd, a second image appears from the security cameras at another toll booth on Route 7 near San Andres de Giles, taken about 20 minutes before the other one, where you can see all 4 family members inside the Fiat Duna. Here, obviously, a lot of those speculations are put to rest, since people had started saying that maybe the father was driving alone and that his angry face meant he had committed some kind of crime. We'll get more into that in the theories. On November 26th, a witness claimed to have seen the whole family calmly walking around a shopping mall in the town of Ameghino 5 days after they disappeared. But investigators dismissed this account. Honestly, if they had been at a shopping mall, what we call a shopping here, there would have been security cameras and a lot more witnesses. These people were being searched for. By the 26th, it had already been about 7 days since the search began, so their photos were already in the media, people were already looking for them, and many recognized the faces of this family. It's hard to believe that only one person would have seen them in such a crowded place like a shopping mall. On November 28th, the Undersecretary of Investigations of the Ministry of Security, Paul Stark, traveled to Pergamino and interviewed the relatives of the missing people, saying that none of the current hypotheses were being ruled out. At this point, there were several hypotheses, some official and others off the record. In other words, these were already somewhat far-fetched theories, so they weren't really being taken too seriously. Even so, they couldn't be ruled out. On November 30th, the manager of the Animal Protection Society of Tres Arroyos claimed that the Pomar family had left their toy poodle with her. Investigators dismissed this immediately. She hadn't mentioned it before, but the toy poodle was with them in the car. They had taken it with them on the trip. This is actually a detail that I didn't see reported in too many media outlets right away. There wasn't much talk about the dog at first. On December 1st, the family's house in Jose Marmol was raided for the second time, looking for a firearm that, according to witnesses, Fernando had recently bought for his own safety, but they didn't find it. This was part of those theories I mentioned earlier, which were based on rumors in a way, and on the toll booth photo. The Buenos Aires security minister, Carlos Stornelli, stated that the Pomar case had nothing to do with insecurity. He leaned toward the theory of a voluntary disappearance. On December 4th, a burned Fiat Duna weekend was found in Moron, but it was later determined that it was gray and not red like the Pomar family's car. The search operations continued, and the prosecutor considered theories such as an accident or a kidnapping. On December 7th, many days had already passed since the beginning of the case, and Prosecutor Paulus said they were considering the possibility of offering a reward to anyone who could provide information about the whereabouts of the Pomar family, and she assured that they would keep searching for them with no time limit. By that point, supposedly, a lot of places along the route had already been investigated. Several police officers had claimed to have searched different areas and not found the Pomar family's car in any of them. Because, let's be honest, one of the first things people thought was that it had been an accident. And it turns out that by this point, the police were saying no, since the car hadn't been seen anywhere along the route. On December 8th, a red Fiat Duna weekend was found on the side of Route 31, near the city of Salto, among bushes and trees. They had found the car overturned and 4 bodies. 24 days had passed since the Pomar family disappeared, and the description matched exactly how the bodies were found, including the car, so shortly after, it was confirmed that it was, in fact, them. On December 9th, after the autopsies on the bodies were completed, it was presumed that they might have survived for a few hours after the accident. At least Gabriela, based on the type of injury she had. In other words, the family had died, and Gabriela had been left dragging herself around for a few hours. There were a ton of theories and hypotheses about this case as it unfolded. Let's just say that the fact they disappeared wasn't really what caught people's attention, but rather the photos at the toll booth, the rumors, and the fact that the police claimed they had already searched the very spot where the family was eventually found. One of the first theories had to do with Fernando's supposed degree in chemistry, which was actually just the specialty he chose in high school. This detail about his job made people following the case think there might be some connection to making and selling drugs. Maybe something went wrong, so they had to run away. Again, I'm saying this wasn't really possible. His degree was from high school, not really that advanced to be able to do something like this. Gabriela's mother then tells a newspaper the following at this point: "I didn't know he was a chemical technician. Since last night, I keep thinking about his degree." Suddenly I think, well, maybe it was a kidnapping because of all the weird stuff going on with ephedrine, that they took him and are threatening his family. When she mentioned everything that was happening with ephedrine, she was referring to a case from the previous year. She was talking about the triple murder in General Rodriguez, which was connected to ephedrine trafficking. The thing is, if this had been a kidnapping because of that, something was off. There were no reports that anyone had demanded a ransom. The next theory suggested that maybe there was some kind of debt involved. Maybe they were running away with the whole family to get away from those who were after them. So to test this theory, investigators looked into their bank accounts. It was possible that, overwhelmed by debt, Fernando Pomar had decided to flee the country with his family. But his accounts, at least the visible ones, were still in order. They had money from a settlement, and their mortgage was up to date. it didn't really seem like they had money problems. The theory of a voluntary escape also started to fall apart because the woman's and the daughter's documents had been left at home. Immigration also had no record of them at the borders. Could they have felt so threatened by those chasing them that they ended up leaving through a clandestine crossing? The truth is, it didn't seem like it. There was even this rumor, which I mentioned a bit earlier, that Fernando Pomar had bought a gun because of safety concerns, and that maybe he had killed his family with it. If this allegation that he had a real gun was true, where was it? Had he maybe taken it with him to kill his family? That's what some people thought as they watched this case on TV. Then the topic came up that maybe there was some conflict in the couple. Maybe something happened along the way that made Fernando kill his family and himself with them. It could have been with the gun, or maybe by speeding up and driving the car off a cliff. Maybe he ran off somewhere far away, killed them, and then killed himself. But this last theory didn't make sense, since even after searching for them in the car, they couldn't find it. And again, I want to emphasize that this vehicle was red, meaning that if you did aerial searches, something like that should be noticeable. After more than 20 days without finding them, the less believable theories started to appear. Maybe they had fallen victim to a cult or been abducted by a UFO. However, as I already mentioned, they were found on the side of the road, dead, with the car crashed and broken among the grass. But even though for many the case was already solved, in the sense that they had been found, and for many this was nothing more than a national embarrassment, that is, that the police had done a poor job, for others it wasn't that simple. They believed that maybe this was a cover-up, not an accident, and that they hadn't simply crashed the car. Let's take a look at why people think this wasn't just a simple family accident. First and foremost, the location where they were found. The place where they were found isn't just a regular dip in the road, but rather a ditch that's 3 meters high and 2 meters deep. Therefore, it's hard to believe that a slow, heavily loaded car like this could have made it through there. As was stated, on this curve, vehicles usually veer off the road to the left, but in this case, they went off to the right. That's a striking difference. On the other hand, the accumulated water and the way they died also raise questions. On Friday, November 13th, it rained very heavily, and the rain continued on Saturday the 14th. The spot is a pit with a drop of more than 2 meters, as I mentioned before, and a lot of water must have collected there, between 40 and 50 centimeters deep. If the people inside the car were thrown out of the vehicle and immediately lost consciousness, they must have drowned. On the other hand, if it jumped the ditch, why weren't the tires deformed, and why weren't the hubcaps, which were plastic, broken or out of place? Besides that, the wheels weren't deflated, which would have happened because of the impact. The front end, neither the tip of the axle nor the ball joint of the vehicle were broken. If the accident happened the way they presented it, the vehicle should have shown these damages. And there are a lot of inconsistencies regarding how they showed the car in videos and photos. First of all, it was pretty clean for having come out of a hole in the ground. Even more so if it had rained the previous days. Why was it so clean? Why did they pull it out? And it was destroyed, but without many signs of mud or things that would have happened because of the weather and the days it had been there. There were no mud stains inside either, which definitely would have happened. Like I said before, the bodies had supposedly been thrown out of the car by the impact, but they didn't have any mud on them either. Again, we're talking about a place with grass, a place where it rained, a place where they were lying for 24 days, and they didn't have any mud on them? That's something very unusual. On the other hand, the girls' bodies were pretty decomposed. Sorry for the detail, but that's the reality. The girls' bodies were decomposed, supposedly because of animals and insects. However, the adults' bodies didn't show any similar decomposition at all, which should have happened after 24 days out in nature since they were lying on the grass. There's also speculation about things that were reported, like, for example, the speed of the vehicle. According to some people, and I can't say this from personal experience or verify it myself, that car shouldn't have been able to go faster than 100 kilometers per hour, which was the speed reported at the time of the accident. It's impossible that it was going that fast, given the characteristics of the vehicle and the accident. First of all, the car ran on diesel, it was also raining at the time, it was nighttime, and the condition of the road wasn't exactly great. Because of these factors, it's believed the car was probably going around 70 kilometers per hour, not 100 as was reported, and that the accident must have happened differently. On another note, the search in the aerial view. Supposedly, they checked this exact spot, with a helicopter and didn't find it. We're talking about a red car that would stand out in the grass. And on the other hand, there was also the ground search, the one the police supposedly carried out and signed off on. So there were only two possibilities. Either the police officers who were supposed to do the search didn't actually do it, or the car wasn't there during the period from when they disappeared until the 24th. There's also speculation that the car hadn't left any tracks in the mud, which would have been visible from the helicopter and also from the road. And even worse, there's the way the bodies were found. Besides the decomposition, there were fractures. Fernando had a fracture in his skull. How did he get it? They had fallen on the grass, and in a way that wouldn't have really made it possible. There was no hair or blood stains in the car or on any rocks. And in the forensic report, they were supposed to mention this, but they didn't. And finally, I also want to say that the cell phones stopped working as if by magic. They didn't request a full report of the calls or anything like that. There was no investigation, the cell towers weren't connected. You know how in a lot of cases we can put together a whole timeline with locations because the phones connect to towers in different areas? But that didn't happen here. Not only did the phones not do this, but they also didn't request the call records to try to see if there was anything strange with the family, which I find pretty odd. I mean, why would the cell phones just disconnect out of nowhere? It doesn't make sense. Unless someone wanted to hide where they were. Beyond everything I just told you, there was a sort of closure regarding the case. As you saw earlier, there was quite a bit of incompetence from the police, supposedly unless it was a cover-up. And that's why, in 2007, a trial was started against those who claimed to have conducted the search. There were 3 police officers, Daniel Fabian Arabido, Luis Angel Quiroga, and Benito Faustino Barcos. They were accused of ideological falsehood. They were the ones who wrote the report stating that they had searched the area where the Pomar family was found and that they hadn't found anything at all. At that time, former Lieutenant Benito Barcos was acquitted. However, in 2018, the 2 police officers who had been convicted, Arabido and Quiaga, were also acquitted. So in the end, no one was held responsible in the case. In other words, the case wasn't left unsolved, but rather classified as an accident. But there are still a lot of things that can't be explained, like why it took so long to find the car. Beyond the fact that these 2 police officers lied, there was actually someone who testified that they saw the car from a bus passing through the area. He was on the 2nd floor and could see the red vehicle in the tall grass, so he called 911, gave them his information, and nothing happened. Nothing came of it after that. And this is a very important detail, because why wouldn't they take his report? I mean, they told him they were taking it, but in reality, nothing was done. Why wouldn't they take the report from someone talking about such a well-known case at the time? I mean, the whole family was being searched for. Their faces were everywhere in the media. It's pretty strange that he was just ignored like that. So there are really only 2 main hypotheses left, which I've already talked about a bit. The first is that it was obviously an accident, that the case is already solved, and it was simply a bit of police incompetence. In other words, it's truly a national embarrassment. But the second hypothesis is that there was a cover-up. That is, yes, it was an accident, but there were people trying to hide it. And to talk about this, we mainly rely on the mark on the side of the car, that white mark one mentioned earlier. It looked like a line that could mean another car, going at high speed, crashed into this one, causing the impact that killed the family. The question is, what car was it? Well, the theory is that it was a patrol car, meaning a police car. So it would be like the patrol car crashes into the Pomar family, the police officers get out, see them dead, and set up the scene to make it look like just an accident. Then, for the next 24 days of the case, they spend their time removing evidence, cleaning up absolutely everything, and leaving the scene as if it was nothing more than an accident caused only by the Pomar family. Those are the 2 main theories. You can tell me what you think. And well, that's the whole case. If you agree with any of the theories or have a particular one in mind, leave it down below in the comments. Just know that I'll be reading your comments and giving them hearts. Here on the side are my Patreons. If you want to know more about it, go to the page linked below in the description. If you have more cases, please leave them in the comments. I always read them and write down the ones you request the most. My cat is in a box in the back in case you wanted to see her. There she is. And that's all from today. I hope you liked it. Here you have a new video, and here you have a recommended video. You can subscribe by clicking on my face, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!